welcome to a Ghoul Guides Association mini-sode. It's a mini episode. It's probably still going to be a bit long because we like to talk to each other, but this is a little one-off. We are the Ghoul Guides. I am Lauren.
And I'm Mary.
And today we are going to be talking about a little unsolved mystery that is a favourite of mine and kind of was the one that started my obsession with unsolved mysteries because we just did our Unsolved Mysteries episode, and I just really wanted to tell Mary about this. So
I love it.
like,
and I love it when you tell me about unsolved cases. So.
I was like, hey, can we do a little mini-sode? And she was like, yeah, of course, because she is my indulger and my enabler.
It's just like a bonus. Like
yeah, bonus. A Ghoul Guides bonus. That's what you get when you join our association. Bonuses and unsolved mysteries. Mm-hmm. So what more could you want, really? So, Mary, have you ever heard of the Toynbee Tiles?
I don't think so. No, and it makes me think of, like bathroom tiles. So,
yeah, it is giving like swimming baths.
Yeah.
Or bathroom tiles. So this is an unsolved mystery, but not a true crime case. And I think this is why, even though this was really, really, really popular on the internet back in the early 2010s, it's kind of fallen out of popular interest. Now, this is partially because some people think it might be solved, but people also have probably solved other unsolved mysteries, and we still, are obsessed with them. But I think it's because there's no clarity to this one. Like, there's not a story behind it. But back in 2011, 2012, the Toynbee Tiles were a frequent feature on those 10 mysterious unsolved mysteries articles that you used to get. Do you remember Cracked.com?
Love those articles.
Yeah,
I used
when I had my first office job, like when I was temping after I finished my undergrad, I literally just used to sit reading Cracked articles on my phone pretending to work. And it was always the Dalatov Pass, things like the spontaneous human combustion cases, the Roswell incident, but also often the Toynbee Tiles. So I will post some links to images of the Toynbee Tiles. But essentially, they are these kind of license plate sized, like they're kind of this size. Sometimes they are bigger, but they're these kind of like often usually rectangular plaques. So tiles is kind of misleading. Sometimes they're called plaques, but they popped up in multiple cities in the US. The reason that they're called Toynbee is because one of the first ones that popped up said, and I quote, Toynbee idea in movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter.
Okay, yeah, I'm into that. Let's go resurrect some dead on Jupiter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the first Toynbee tile was photographed in the 1980s. And they kind of started becoming a popular, like, global thing in the 1990s. So they all tend to have a similar theme to them. Now, some Toynbee tiles are considered, the canonical tiles. They are almost definitely created by the same person or group, and then, as often happens, other people have copycatted them and imitated them. But they are not made by someone called Toynbee. Arnold Joseph Toynbee was an English philosopher and historian, and he had some pretty funky ideas. And that's what he's referencing. But he also did like a lot of post-war work. Toynbee did a lot of stuff on like genocides and World War II, and some of the atrocities that happened in that period, the modern postmodern period. So what are these tiles? Where did they come from? Obviously, I would recommend you Google and have a look at them because they're pretty interesting aesthetically. But the other name that's on that tile, so not name, it does come up on others. But the other thing that's referenced on that tile is movie 2001. So as you could probably guess, if it was in the 1980s and 1990s, 2001 hadn't happened yet. But you know what had happened? Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's literally what I was gonna say. Like 2001: Space Odyssey. Get me to Jupiter, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of these tiles are directly referencing the works of Toynbee and Stanley Kubrick's A Space Odyssey. Now, if you have not seen that film, why? Why have you not seen that film? Have you not seen that film?
No.
Mary going. Okay, next time I see you.
I'm so
oh my
bad.
God.
You know, I'm so bad at watching films. Like, I'm not a film person. And I only watch a lot of films now because Craig watches films and
okay.
makes me watch films.
I need to tell Craig that he needs to watch A Space Odyssey with you because, oh my God. Right, well, in this case, I'm just going to quickly check the dates for Space Odyssey because I assumed you had seen it. But maybe I should tell you about it. Okay, so Space Odyssey was released in 1968, and it was written by Arthur C. Clarke, famous sci-fi writer. There is a prize named after him, and it was semi-based on a short story that Clarke, I think it was called The Sentinel, that Clarke had written. So it's all about a voyage for a series of astronauts and scientists and a supercomputer, an AI called HAL. And they are going to Jupiter to investigate an alien monolith. So literally this huge, big black pillar. And the opening of Space Odyssey is really famous. You see these apes, they discovered this stone monolith, and it's kind of like, oh, these have always appeared. Most recently, the trailer for the Barbie movie, shot for shot, referenced Space Odyssey, which,
I love
off
that.
topic, makes me so excited for the Barbie movie because just love that for us, love that for them.
Yeah.
Sounds really interesting. So yeah, Space Odyssey was one of those movies that really shook everybody. It sparked a new genre of science fiction. A lot of people took it, I don't want to say literally, because people knew it was a film. It's not like War of the Worlds or something where people maybe were like, oh, was this real? Like, it's not found footage. It's a film. But it's a real kind of trippy early aspect of something like speculative fiction, because HAL, the supercomputer, is kind of like the creepy maybe villain, like that's inspired stuff like Portal, and basically like HAL is sort of like judging the humans and has learned all about the human race and is basically like, you're all terrible and you should all die. It's a very existential movie. I watched it at like 17 and I think I just had like a massive panic attack afterwards and was like, my mind is blown.
But it's always those kinds of films though that make you think, and yeah, like those speculative films where they're in the future, maybe a future not so far from now, and what if this is, what happened, especially with technology and technological advances. And I mean, look at AI now, it's fucking wild. So
yeah, super wild.
Yeah.
So the Toynbee Tiles reference this idea that so they're called the Toynbee Tiles. There's some speculation that links to a Ray Bradbury short story. There's some speculation that it's some kind of like government plot, or that it's referring to something that maybe, you know, like the men who stare at goats type stuff, like that maybe this was something that was like actually being discussed. But the reason I wanted to talk to you about them is because they're just so weird. So they all say like really weird stuff. They're all almost in like capital letters. They appear mostly, so actually a place that we have never been but are very fond of, Philadelphia, because of our good friends at the Rosenbach Museum. They're like multicolored. Sometimes they would have, so like one of them was like kill all the journalists, like
that's
death to all the
unnecessarily
journalists.
violent and aggressive.
Yeah, and like, oh, I should have like prepped them to show you. Like underneath one of the tiles it said like you must make and glue like tile, like and there's like weird stuff about the media, and like they're just super weird, but they're like in potholes essentially. So one of them says, House of Hades, all media must be reduced to ashes in society. House of Hades, tiles made from the ground bones of dead journalists. They started popping up again.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
so weirdly specific.
Yes.
And kind of gross.
Yeah. And it's not super clear like which ones are legitimate and which ones aren't, because obviously some of them are kind of like suggesting, you know, that Space Odyssey is real and that there's some kind of weird, either I don't know if they think it's a plot or if it's science or if it's supernatural, but the dead are being resurrected on Jupiter. But yeah, two things about this. Okay, so two things about this. I find this interesting for two reasons. One is that something like Space Odyssey, 20 years later, somebody is going to the effort to put these tiles out there. Whether or not it's a hoax or whether or not someone really believes this, that because there's no cultural kind of like consciousness of this. We know that it's talking about 2001, but I don't think there's some like QAnon level conspiracy that the dead are being revived on Jupiter, or that actually 2001 was some kind of documentary rather than a movie.
I mean, you say that, but I don't have any kind of expectations, you know, or limits to conspiracy theories, you know. Why not? Why not, you know, why not resurrect the dead on Jupiter?
Why not resurrect the dead on Jupiter? And also, like, 2001 is a movie about an AI that turns violent, and it's about humanity and the progression of humanity. So someone has gone to the effort of putting these down. They have a meaning, whether or not it's a hoax or it's intentional. They have a meaning. No one is 100% sure what they actually mean. Now, there's an article that was like, or a letter that was sent to, I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer in the 80s, that basically says it's like a theory about like Toynbee's history, about 2001. It mentions resurrecting the dead on Jupiter. It talks about conspiracy and the media controlling things. And a lot of people are fairly sure that whoever wrote that letter, and I say whoever because technically we know who wrote that letter, but the makers of a 2017 documentary about the tiles think that it's someone else and he was using that name as an alias. But basically, whoever wrote that letter made these tiles. The other thing that gets me is, how the hell has nobody ever seen anybody put these tiles down? How are they putting these tiles down? This is the thing that really gets me, because I'm like, one of the theories is that they that basically, you know, like the bottom of a car is technically sort of like, in an old car, it's almost hollow, like you could pull the material up.
Oh yeah.
So one of the theories, they like glue them, and then as they're driving they just drop them, because they have really weird placement, and a lot of them haven't been preserved.
So when did this take place? In the 80s?
So the
Like,
first tiles start popping up in the 80s, and
mm,
then in the 90s is when it starts to get popular. They
okay.
stop appearing for a while, and then they suddenly start appearing again in the 2010s.
So I'm not surprised that no one has seen anyone dropping these things, because me, with my, paranoia head on, very aware
Mm-hmm.
of all of these surveillance cameras that there are, just, around public spaces. But if you go back, 20, 30, 40 years, there was not as much CCTV as there is now. Also,
Very true.
storage for CCTV would often be on like VHS tapes, and you would just literally record over. So
Yeah,
if
that
you
is
didn't
very
know
true.
to look, you didn't know to look for, at 29 Broad Street Avenue, or wherever they were being dropped. I
Mm-hmm.
made up that address, obviously. But if you didn't know to look at this specific time for this specific happening, then if there was any CCTV, maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
just erased. Well, maybe there wasn't any CCTV in the first place. And I think, a lot of people are not, but, people are nosy to some extent, but a lot of people aren't. And you could just walk up and do something, and maybe even have like an official kind of, um, roadwork sign, just
Yeah,
go and do
that's
it and
true.
then leave. And that wouldn't stick in people's
No,
heads.
but then that's what makes me so fascinated with this. So like some people have said it can't just be one guy because they've popped up in so many places. It can't just be one person. And what is also interesting is people always assume that this is a guy. I also think it's probably a guy. But
Yeah.
I do find
They
it
are
interesting that we
they are a weird species.
that we assume that this is a dude. But like there's no there's no clear message. Like okay, you're suggesting that we resurrect the dead on Jupiter. Jupiter was the planet they were going to in 2001. You've referenced 2001. Toynbee, as a historian, talks a lot about like war and media control. Like I think he talked a lot about like Goebbels and Hitler and like propaganda and stuff. Other than that, no real obvious connection. And like they're just in really, really weird places that you're just
I
like
wonder
dropping them.
I wonder this has reminded me of the ABC mysteries, an Agatha Christie novel,
Yes.
where you have a man and he's essentially a door-to-door salesman of stockings, and he's told to go to loads of different places and to sell stockings at specific addresses and different things. And
Mm-hmm.
spoiler, that it's he's not the killer. He just happens to turn up in all the
At
places
all the
where these murders
places.
are happening,
That's
because the
smart.
actual killer is the one who's basically employing him and telling him to go to all these places. And obviously it's
Mm-hmm.
not suspicious for a door-to-door travel salesman to go to all these places. So maybe it's just that it's someone who has travel in their work, and as a hobby they make these tiles, and then they go to different places, drop them off, and
Yeah, that could.
you know,
And so apparently, I don't know how true this is, but like, one of the articles that I read said that whoever makes them like is a crafter. So
mm,
they do have this really weird like handwriting on them. Like the handwriting is very. I think it'd actually be quite easy to mimic, but like it's quite recognizable. But essentially, like the way that they are made is that they're in between two pieces of tar paper. And because they're on roads, and that's why one of the theories is they drop them out the bottom of the car, like as cars drive over them, they would
yeah,
it would basically
yeah.
like solidify the glue. And there are most of them are in Philadelphia. Like Philadelphia is where most of them is. So it's possible that it's someone who used to go out on business a lot. And they kind of like look like mosaic art essentially. Um, and yeah, so this guy called James Marasco, who I think died in like 2003, 2004. So if it was him, then the newer ones definitely are copycats. But he sent this letter to, I think it was the Philadelphia Inquirer, and it said that Jupiter would be colonized by bringing all the people on Earth who had ever died back to life. Not 100% sure what his suggestion for the way of doing that was. But the
It's interesting
tiles,
though. It's interesting though because that taps into a lot of apocalyptic cults and
yes,
end of world narratives that have some aspects of the resurrection of the dead as part of the end times, and what it's doing is in a very weird way connecting that to Jupiter and
yeah,
saying the resurrection of the dead is going to happen. And this is a kind of key trope in apocalyptic cults and also Jewish traditions and Christian traditions, and many others. And it's just saying that, but obviously it's not going to happen on Earth. Where would they go? So Jupiter.
yeah. It's just so weird. So, like, yeah, one of my things about this is like, how has no one ever spotted them? I do think actually the dropping them out of a car theory is quite smart. I do think that's quite possible. If you knew there was a pothole on the road, if you drove past it all the time, it'd be quite easy, especially in like traffic, to just drop it. And then if it does solidify by cars going over it, that makes a lot of sense. What doesn't make sense to me, and obviously yes, there is this letter that someone wrote in the 80s, but more and more tiles appeared after that letter. It's such an intense thing to do to not follow up. Like, for example, the guy who like convinced a bunch of people on the internet that he was a time traveler. That was a real research sustained, like, that dude had an agenda. He was a libertarian. Like, he definitely wanted to scare people into being like suspicious of the government, suspicious of intense scientific advancement, to go back to, living by the land and things like that. There was an agenda. What the hell is this person's agenda? Like, the thing about this is an unsolved mystery that I love. Why?
I
Why
I
would
think
you
it's
do this?
great. I'm really into it, and do a little crafting. Just have a little bit of fun. I mean, I have to say, I do not endorse the violent messages on the tiles that you've said. Like, I'm not on board with that. But like, I'm just gonna write some weird stuff about Jupiter and make some pretty little tiles, and then just drop them into
Mhm.
potholes. It's
Yeah,
nice to
I
have a
mean,
hobby.
it's nice to have a hobby.
Yeah.
You like at a craft club, it's like, oh, I embroider protest messages on, on tote bags. Oh, I like to paint plant pots. What do you do? I put weird sci-fi conspiracy messages on tiles, and then I embed them into public roads.
It's not the weirdest hobby I've ever heard of. There are
Yeah,
stranger things.
yeah. I mean, sure, 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 sure. Yeah. I mean, I always thought it was really weird that he was like connected Toynbee's idea to 2001. But so I am quoting here from,
Mm.
and this is on the Wikipedia page, but also like multiple articles about it. Quote this. So Toynbee's idea, they think, comes from this passage in Toynbee's book Experiences, where he says human nature presents human minds with a puzzle which they have not yet solved and may never succeed in solving, for all that we can tell. The dichotomy of a human being into soul and body is not a datum of experience. No one has ever been or met a living human soul without a body. So this suspicion is basically that this thing that Toynbee says about like human souls and bodies, and like that once he says, like, once dead, um like, can a soul come back to life again? And he's like kind of thinking about like Christianity, and you know it's really important to note that Toynbee's histories are intensely postmodern. They're being written after a period of war, of atrocity, of genocide, of like all of these things. So, you know, that kind of makes sense. And it could be possible that when this dude that's making these tiles is talking about Jupiter, he's talking about the Arthur C. Clarke short story as well as the movie. I don't have much to say about them because there isn't much to say. Like when I was rereading it, because as I have said before, I'm really bad and I don't do my research because I'm just like, I know about this thing. But this last couple of days when I was rereading to like research, and I was like, okay, so I'll explain like when they started and what they are. And then as I was reading, I was like, okay, so no one actually knows. There is no like, there's no clear message. There are theories about who they might have been and who the people might have been. So like from that, so it wasn't 2017, it was 2011, the documentary. Even they, like where they're trying to figure out who the person is, there's still no purpose. Like it's not like
with art, does art have to have a purpose?
This is very true. This is very true. This is very true. But crop circles, for example. We know, like, when the crop circle hoax is exposed,
wait,
a lot of the people that were
I'm sorry, hoax?
Oh, awkward. So like when the crop circle hoaxes, I mean, some of them haven't been exposed, but the big crop circle hoaxes, like when they've been exposed, it's usually mathematicians. Like it's nerdy mathematicians wanting to see if they were able to do these things and make these patterns, and it had a purpose, and sometimes it was to trick people into thinking that there were aliens. But these just have such an unclear purpose, and I am really surprised that this is not something. I was just thinking about it and I was like, I am really shocked. I can see why people haven't picked this up, because there is no clear narrative.
Yeah.
I even was like, should I bother doing this episode? Because I actually don't know if I have anything to say apart from there's some tiles and they're really weird and they talk about Space Odyssey and resurrecting the dead on Jupiter. Because that is literally all I know.
But what more do you need? I think that's great. Take away all the stuff about murdering the media, and I think it's fine.
Well, there is the question as well as whether or not the tiles that talk about like dead journalists are from the same creator or if they're a copycat. The key message, and that tile about those 4 lines, that tile has been it appears in lots of different places. So it does seem like the creator just put this one tile in multiple places. But then to not like, there are these like near one of the tiles that has the Kubrick thing on. There is this set of 4 tiles that have this rambling story about like the mafia being after them and the government and the media, that spins this narrative of conspiracy and media control and all of this. I'm not fully convinced that they are canonical Toynbee tiles, shall we say. But even if they're not, it does create this wider narrative of somebody trying to expose a conspiracy and them coming for him and resurrecting. But also, why would we colonize Jupiter by resurrecting the dead?
But I think just going back to like the different, is this the same person? Is it not? It's very Gothic in the way that, so what if it is different people who are just adding like on loads of different layers and appropriating someone's weird tile hobby to talk about like their own thing? And, it's just like, it's very kind of, I'm going to appropriate this and I'm going to be weird and yes, let's resurrect the dead on Jupiter. And yeah.
Well, from the little I've told you, do you think it's more likely that it's somebody who fully believes this, or do you think it's somebody just trying to fuck with everybody and cause a bit of a ruckus?
I think I would quite like it to be someone who's just having a bit of fun. I think, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? You think it's someone who genuinely believes?
I go back and forth because part of me thinks it's so weird and random that it's got to be a hoax. And it's not someone who believes it. It's just somebody or it's somebody that saw that letter, because it's not clear like the timeline of whether or not the tile started first or the letter started first. But the dedication to it and absolute weirdness of it makes me think it's someone who actually believes it.
Yeah.
I think it's more likely that it's actually someone who really believes it. And the thing is, I don't think we'll ever know, because the likelihood is that the person that they think it might be passed away. Whether or not it actually was him or it was multiple people, like there's debate over this, but I know I said in the Unsolved Mystery episode that the thing that I love about Unsolved Mysteries is that there's an answer somewhere. I don't know if we ever will know the answer to this one.
Yeah.
Because this person was not on forums and early message boards. They were not, as far as I know, only one letter exists. There's no manuscript, there's no manifesto. There is just these weird ass tiles across multiple US states, but mainly Philadelphia, that potentially are suggesting we should resurrect the dead on Jupiter, but could be suggesting the government is resurrecting the dead on Jupiter. Both of which are super weird, because we would all be dead about 7 times over before we reached Jupiter. It's that far away. So if we are resurrecting the dead there, not sure how we're getting onto that, but yeah, I just wanted to tell you about them because they're one of those unsolved mysteries that in the early days of BuzzFeed listicles and cracked listicles and everybody having an iPhone, like this was all very popular. It was the very early stages of people having smartphones and being able to read things on their smartphones, and that's when BuzzFeed and cracked became really popular. But while things like the Dalatov Pass and the Glyco Monster and the Summerton Man, which at that time was sometimes called the Tamam Shud case, they have like continued to grow, and they are now these huge pop culture things. The Toynbee Tiles have kind of like not fallen by the wayside. I think they're still popular, but I think because they're so weird.
I guess there's nothing to sensationalize there either, like because everything's so true. Speculative, as in who's doing it, why are they doing it, is this a hoax, are there multiple people, what's the point? It's just basically all you have is a load of tiles and then a load of theories.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sensationalize in the same way as like this person's missing or this person's dead, or
Yeah. And like I guess it's not like other conspiracy theories where there is some not necessarily truth to them, but some possibility. Well, not necessarily possibility, like spoiler alert, the Earth's not flat.
Wait. What?
I am just dropping truth bombs on you today. I'm really sorry.
You really are. Sorry. You're like, you're blowing my mind.
Like, as much as I hate to admit it, there are quote unquote reasonable things that make people think that the Earth's not flat. In the same way, there's things that make people think that Atlantis existed in the way that Plato said it did. I don't think there's anything out there that would make anybody... I don't think the dead being resurrected on Jupiter, or that Stanley Kubrick's 2001 is not just purely a sci-fi fantasy based on an Arthur C. Clarke story. Like, there's not anything to hold on to. Like, it's not become a popular and enduring pop culture conspiracy theory, because it is so implausible. And, it's not like Aliens, where it's like, oh yeah, the government would keep that from us, or that does make sense. Yeah, it's just so freaking weird and delightful. I think this is the thing. As far as I know, I mean, if this tale about the mafia being after him is true, then that's different. Or if he is a person who, is experiencing psychosis or was experiencing delusion, then obviously that is very sad. But they're not hurting anyone. Like, they're just chilling in the roads of Philadelphia, having a great time. And I love that. I love an unsolved mystery that's kind of not really hurting anybody and is not founded in some terrible, awful crime. That's really nice.
Yeah. It is really delightfully weird.
Delightful, right?
So yeah,
Delightfully weird.
thank you for sharing it today.
You're welcome. I just thought, why not? If you were gonna make a tile, what would your tile say?
Oh, I don't know.
Or what would your tile be about? Like what? Like either a conspiracy theory that you were like, I need to tell the people this, or that you just really wanted to fuck with everybody and make them really confused. What would you put on your
maybe
tile?
something like the Avril Lavigne clone, or the Queen being a lizard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think in this day and age, if there was a new Toynbee tile, it would be the theory that birds aren't real.
Oh my gosh, I love that guy.
Which, yeah.
Yes.
Because one of my favorite things about that is that was openly a hoax, and then people did start to believe it, and now no one's entirely sure whether or not it is actually a hoax or people actually believe it.
I've seen interviews with that guy, and he's 100% committed to the bit, but it is a bit.
Yeah. It is a bit. Yeah. But other people don't realize it's a bit and genuinely think that birds aren't real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably maybe have something about the birds not being real, because I think that one's really fun.
I love that. Yeah.
Maybe it might be like, maybe I'll go for a Tumblr joke, like a full millennial. It might be about Spiders George.
Yeah.
And that would be really funny. But I think people would know. It needs to be something that people would be like, what the fuck is this person talking about?
Yeah.
So, yeah. What would be on your Toynbee tile? Let us know. Leave a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Send us an email.
Send us a tile.
Send us a tile. Send a fake bird. Whatever you fancy, really. It's up to you. But if you would like us to do more weird mini-sodes where Lauren actually did attempt to do research this time and then realised there wasn't a lot to actually make notes on, because it was all like, maybe, we don't know, it could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's anything else weird like this that you'd like us to talk about within the big Gothic soup that is pop culture, let us know. But in the meantime, we will return to our usual Ghoul Guides Association programming, and make sure you stay safe and stay spooky.
Stay safe and stay spooky.